Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this presentation about studying at universities or studying dentistry at university abroad. Basically, this must be about the fifth time we've done this webinar, and it's always done with one aim in mind, and that is to make sure that you have the answers to the questions when you need them. A lot of people regard applying to dentistry abroad as a plan B. That's perfectly natural, perfectly normal, but that doesn't mean you need to do your research later. In an ideal world, you do all of your research into all your options over the summer holiday, come back in year 13, knowing exactly what you're doing in the UK and when, if at all, you need to push the button on whatever application abroad you might be interested in doing. So before I get stuck into today's presentation, I'm just going to talk a little bit about who we are. Some of you will be very familiar with us. Others might have only heard of us in the last few weeks. We have had a huge number of inquiries come in just in the last week or so after A-levels exams have been finished. That's totally normal. But we have been in existence for 20 years now, providing students with information about English taught higher education in Europe and further abroad. Sorry, that was really quite bad. We are, very well experienced. Have seen pretty much everything come and go in this particular field. And if you have any questions about any option out there, even if we don't work with it, chances are we probably know something about it. Now, I'm going to be talking to you about a few universities later on that we do work with directly, but we also work with all sorts of universities for all range of different subjects. We are not just dentistry focused. That just seems to be an area that keeps us very busy for reasons that you will already know. For example, this year in the UK, I think there were about 15 applicants for every one place. Next year, it's recently been announced there will be an expansion of places in the UK, 50 extra places in Portsmouth and in Norwich, I believe. This is a drop in the ocean. It's not going to go anywhere towards dampening down demand. We have also seen from our experience that this has been the most busy year ever. But anyway, I'd now like to come on to how to choose a dental school abroad. But before I get into the dental schools, I want to focus on you for a moment. This is hugely important and often gets lost because a lot of people start out on this journey from a place of desperation. You've decided you want to be a dentist. That's the only career you can see yourself doing. It isn't working in the UK. Oh, I suppose I'll have to go abroad then. This is not really the best motivation for going to live in another country. Really think about living in another country for 5 or 6 years. Think about the implications of that. I know it's going to be very, very difficult for you to really know what that feels like, but it's not something for you to just blithely think that we can just carry on as if we're in the UK. You're going to be a very long way from your regular support network. You'll be living in another country where there will be another language going on, and you will have to learn that. And you will also find that, the support on offer from the university may not be up to the standard of your expectations in the UK. It might be perfectly fine for a European university, but it might be different from what you were expecting. The next thing, as I just briefly mentioned there, language. Being a dentist involves being able to talk to people, reassure people, make them feel comfortable in your presence. Okay, how are you going to do that if you can't speak to them? This is a real issue. Now, obviously, in teaching hospitals, it is well understood that people won't necessarily be speaking the language, but there are standards required of you in pretty much every European country. A little bit later on, I'll go into which countries where language is more important than others. But really, you do need to be prepared to do this. And if you're not, probably a good idea not to go and study abroad. The next factor I've put up here is, think about where you want to work after graduation. It's not always the case that you'll want to work in the UK necessarily. That might have an impact on where you go and study. This is largely the reason why we encourage you to stay within the European Union if you want to work in the UK, although there are potential issues with that, which I'll come on to a little bit later. But, do make sure that you think a little bit more about, where it is you want to work. The next thing to bear in mind is, well, obviously, your grades will be peculiar to you. They'll be different from anybody else's. There is no point thinking about going to a university where you just don't stand a chance of getting in. Make sure you've got the right subjects as well. Sometimes these can be non-negotiable, okay? And also, don't necessarily panic if you haven't got the grades and subjects right now. Resitting might not be the end of the world that you might imagine it to be. The final thing I want to just mention while we're talking about you and what you need to think about before you even approach another dental school is financial. The reality of the situation is I can give you information, I can't give you money. Nobody can. Okay. You're not going to be able to take your student loans from the UK with you. These just don't go abroad for any degree. So you really need to make sure you've got this money sorted out before you start applying to universities. There's no point applying, getting a place, and then imagine some kind of, scholarship is going to crawl out of the woodwork. It really won't. In our experience as well, universities that do have funding and scholarships available tend not to make them available to health science students. So you might see on a university's website, yes, of course, we have generous financial aid, but if people studying business or IT or something like that, and you just won't get a sniff of it. But I'd now like to help you with the bit that I think is right in front of you right now. This is really the thing that I think you need to be thinking about at this moment in time if you are, just completing year 12 and you've just finished your exams. You need to be researching your options abroad. And how are you going to do that? Well, I mean, one of the ways people do this, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you view it, is that they will get in touch with people they already know, universities they've already heard of. Now, that is absolutely fine, but please do bear in mind that people's information might be out of date. If you spoke to somebody who graduated 10 years ago, for example, they may have only gone to the university they went to because some of the ones available to you right now just simply didn't exist. And there are new universities launching all the time as well. So the fact that you might have heard of a university is good, might give you some kind of reassurance, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the only one. Far more important than that, I would suggest, is to look at what dental schools actually deliver. And here I've got to profess, I am not an expert. I am not a professor of dentistry. I never have been a healthcare professional. I am an education professional. I can help you get in. That's what I do. You need to be looking at what the various curricula on offer mean and what various approaches people take. Now, I've mentioned a few of the things that come up very typically when you start looking at universities abroad here. Problem-based learning, not very common in dental schools in the UK, quite common in European ones. Oral exams, something that British students seem to hate, but are very much a factor of life in places like Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland. Negative marking. Every year we send students to Spain. Every year they complain about negative marking. They just can't get their head around it. The idea that you will be penalized for a wrong answer. All of these things you can deal with, okay? All of these things are, but might have an impact on where you decide to go. Language requirements, sometimes you might need to speak a bit of the language before you can go there, or it might improve your chances of getting there. I will also just reflect on the fact that sometimes you need to learn a language to an agreed level before you're allowed to go into clinics. In Spain, every single university there requires you to learn to level B2 on the Common European Framework of Reference for languages by the time you get to the end of year 3. So this is a fact of life. You're not going to be able to negotiate your way out of it. In most other European countries, you will have to learn the language to a reasonable level of proficiency. There is only really one country where English can get you nearly everywhere, nearly all the way through, and that is Cyprus, which is largely because it's a former British colony. This might also be the case, I suppose, in Malta, but I don't really work with Maltese schools for reasons I can go into during the Q&A. The next thing is something hugely important. And this is because obviously dentistry is a practical degree. You really need to think about the clinics and where the patients are going to come from and how many clinical hours you're going to get. All right. Some universities will provide patients for you. They will have lengthy lists of people, usually because they've done some deal with the local authority to offer cut price treatment to people who can't afford it ordinarily, or in the case of Cyprus, they treat a lot of people in refugee camps there. Other places like Bulgaria, you are responsible for finding your own patients. Okay, you have to go into the streets sometime to find them, have family members fly over from the UK sometimes. It's really quite ridiculous. And if you think this is a bit crazy, I mentioned to you earlier, before I started this presentation, I'm talking to you from Prague. Very often on my Facebook feed, we will get students at Charles University looking for patients. And it's quite common for me to see cut price treatment, come and get half price, fillings or whatever you need. I don't think that's necessarily a great way for you to get your education. I would say you should really bear that in mind when you're looking at the price you pay for your education. If something is cheaper but not delivering you patience, is it even really worth it? Would be my assessment. The next thing you need to think about, come back again to you and the fact that we are talking about you going abroad for half a decade, potentially a bit longer. What's your quality of life going to be like? What are the accommodation options going to be like? Will they be like in the UK? Will you be happy with what you are getting? What are the term times going to be? How are your Christmas and Easter holidays going to work? I can tell you, basically, you won't have lengthy ones because that's not the way the academic year works in most European countries. You will have to you'll probably be learning on a semester system. That means that your first semester will run something like September through to January, then a short break before you start again in February, going through to June, which means Christmas and Easter holidays will be short, and Christmas holiday in particular will be taken up with revision for your exams that are coming in January. But that is a fact of life at all European universities. I don't think there's any way you can go where that's going to be a little bit different. Again, I've already mentioned money once. I'm going to mention it again right now. Think of the overall cost involved in terms of living costs, tuition fees, dental materials, and things like that. The next thing I put up here is a question you will ask. It's inevitable, and it is important, but you need to know what the graduation rate is for any university that you're going to, because getting in is one thing, getting out on time, properly qualified, quite another. In some countries, it's quite normal for people to sign up for a 5-year degree and still be there 6, 7 years later, finishing off. Okay, this is, in a European context, quite normal. So in many European countries, students aren't necessarily worried by this because, well, that's just what happens. But if you're coming from a UK background where it's kind of normal that if you start, you know when you'll finish, that can feel a little bit different. Okay. Some of the universities we work with in Spain, for example, have very, very high graduation rates, over 95%. But other ones we know of in Hungary, that on-time graduation rate might be as low as 25%, meaning that 75% of students who start don't necessarily finish on time. Some of them will finish, some of them will have transferred, they'll finish at a later date and so on, but it's, very, very different from what you might be expecting. So I would say that these questions, or these things that you need to get answers to, cut across any university that you are interested in, and these are things that you should do your own research into. Now, who should you be asking? Well, I spoke about former students just a moment ago. People who've already graduated from universities can be a useful source of information, as much as students who are there right now. But I do always have to make the point that current students may not necessarily, or definitely won't have exactly the same experience of you as you will. So, their information can be useful, but don't take it as gospel, okay? Things might be very, very different for you. Also, dentists who qualified abroad, as I've already mentioned. It might also be worth talking to dentists in the UK who have hired people from medical or dental schools abroad. Quite often, they will tell you very, very complimentary things about the people that they've hired from Hungary, Bulgaria, Spain, and so on. One thing that I do find is less useful these days are online forums and social media of limited use and questionable accuracy. We obviously do, well, we don't post in online forums. That is a deliberate policy. I'm sick of looking at the student room and seeing the amount of nonsense there that's regurgitated. Some of it, to be honest, is things that I've told people that they've decided to post on there, but they haven't really understood that what they're posting is something that's very specific to their circumstances, so absolutely useless to you. So I would say that the student room in particular is accurate about 25% of the time. The rest, it's just junk. Okay, so be very careful with that. TikTok, yeah, I know there are people on TikTok making a big song and dance about various dental schools in Europe. Be careful is all I will say on that. Not everything is as it seems. And a final word there on agents. I know that a lot of you will be thinking, surely I can do this myself. I don't need an agent. That might actually be true. It probably isn't, though. Allow me to explain. Now, first of all, I should say I am an agent sometimes. Sometimes I'm a consultant. Sometimes I'm neither of those things. It really depends on who you are or what university you were asking me about. Now, the reason why my status varies is because my relationship with universities varies, okay? You might expect that I'm going to get paid one way or the other for doing work here, and nearly all the time, that payment comes directly from the university rather than students we work with, okay? But there are some exceptions there if you're asking me about universities where I don't have a relationship. But I would say that in general, there are a lot of agents out there. A lot of them do themselves no favors. I would say that you need an agent. Well, you don't necessarily need an agent to apply to a university, but you might need them to go through all the process of, getting your documents translated and arranging accommodation and stuff like that. And that is a service that has a value, but you shouldn't be paying for that up front. Okay. You should, and certainly do not hand over a large chunk of money to anybody without an offer letter in your hand from the university you're actually talking about. It is unfortunately quite common for agents to talk to you all the time about, oh yeah, you can go to this university in Bulgaria, and then before you know it, oh sorry, they're full or it's not going to work out, but I've got you an offer in Georgia. That is junk. Just ignore it. Okay, people who behave that way are not worthy of your trust, definitely not worthy of your money. Okay, so be very, very careful with agents. I will always tell you exactly what we are and exactly what the relationship is. I will never ever hit you with a hidden fee or anything like that. This is part of the reason why we've managed to survive so long when we've seen so many people come and go. But do also bear in mind, one of the most useful things about agents is that we've seen it all. I've been lied to by universities many times, more than you ever will. Okay, I've helped thousands of people over the years get into dental school. I know a thing or two. I know when you're wasting your time. I know when you're not. I know when you should be applying and not. I know when you should be, should be thinking about going to study dentistry abroad or not. Okay, so there are areas of this whole process where we can have useful input that isn't actually directly related to which university you end up applying to at all. Okay, so you decide who you want to work with. Always be very, very clear about who that is. But again, if you end up talking to like 10 different agents about the same university, that is clearly a waste of time for everybody. And I would say that sometimes students and their parents can be many, many more times dishonest than agents. Okay, so it's not a one-way street. Now, the next thing I want to move on to a little bit here, I'm talking less about the universities at all, and I'm coming back to you and exactly where you are in the process, okay? Because the key thing that's going to make a difference as to how we're able to help you with an application strategy for 2027 is what you are doing in the UK. If you are also trying in the UK, there are some universities that will not consider you until after that, because they quite simply don't have enough places to make conditional offers or insurance offers rather. They also don't have enough, time to have people show up on results day and say, oh, actually, I don't need you anymore, and then go off and find students who genuinely need to go and study there. So some universities can afford to be picky. Other universities, not so much, and they'll be like, yeah, we understand it's part of the game. But there are genuinely options we work with where if you are applying in the UK, we'll have to just sit the next year out and wait and see what happens there. But if you aren't there, if you aren't, then you can just apply whenever you are ready. What I would say about applying to universities abroad, universities in the UK rather, is, be brutally honest with your chances. There is no point trying in the UK if your UCAT score doesn't match up, or if your A-level predicted grades or actual grades don't match up either. You're almost certainly not going to get in. Also, bear in mind that if you are trying for a second time, there are restrictions on that, and your chances are not going to be quite as high as they would have been first time round, depending on your A-level grades, obviously. Third time around, look, it just doesn't happen. You're just wasting your time, okay? So I would encourage you, think very, very seriously about your chances, and I would suggest that the first thing that's going to give you a very accurate steer as to whether you need to apply abroad with us will be your UCAT score, which you'll probably get sometime in August. And if that's already looking doubtful, then talk to us about developing an international application strategy. Now, part of the reason why I don't encourage you to apply abroad if you are also applying in the UK is because the systems themselves do not mesh together well. By which I mean, if you're applying in the UK and abroad, you're going to get answers back at very different times, and you might find yourself with an offer from a university abroad, and you're still waiting to hear if you want to go, if you're going to be called for interview in the UK. If that happens, the university abroad will very likely be asking you for a sizable deposit, which you will have to put down. And sometimes that's refundable. More often than not, it isn't. So you could end up wasting money because of this. Okay. So be mindful of that. There's no point applying until you really know that you need to go. Obviously, you will already know that the October deadline is the important one in the UK context. In the case of international dental schools, two of the ones we work with will probably be full before this date, but the vast majority won't. Okay. So you've still got time to apply after that date into December, January. Absolutely no problem. If you get interviews and then get rejections, we'll probably still be able to help you in late March. If you get interviews and then don't hear back from universities until May, that can start to get more problematic. Spain possibly will have some options. Cyprus will probably still be possible as well. If you get an offer in the UK and you're waiting until results day to see if you can get it, or to see what happens, basically, and only then will you commit to an application abroad, I do have to tell you that your chances now are far lower than they used to be simply because of Brexit. Your chances of getting a visa for this are much, much lower than they ever were. So you're probably looking at a gap year. Okay. Now, coming on to entry requirements at EU dental schools. Now, again, it's quite difficult for me to generalize here because I'm talking about, 50 or so different schools. They all look for slightly different things. But the things that are going to be important are, well, obviously A levels. Okay. In our experience with the universities we work with, if you have ABB or better, you should be okay to apply abroad. Obviously, please bear in mind this includes biology and chemistry. If you have CCC or better, there are universities where we could probably help you, but the route that we would recommend would probably involve a foundation year. If you get below CCC, honestly, you've done nothing yet that proves you've got what it takes to become a dentist. Please retake your A levels. It's much better doing that than going for one of the universities, one of the options out there that might accept you with those grades. The reason why I'm quite brutally honest about this is because there are some universities out there where people get predicted grades of ABB, apply on the basis of that, and then get an unconditional offer and take up that place, even though they actually got, D's and E's in biology and chemistry. They fail. Okay. They don't make it through the first year. This has become increasingly obvious to us in recent years. So, yeah, you might be able to wangle your way in with terrible performance in your A levels, but please don't don't think that that makes it easy or sensible for you to go and study abroad. I mean, obviously, everybody can have an off day, and those results might not reflect you in the slightest. But I would urge caution. Some countries will make you an offer based on predicted grades alone, so your actual grades don't then matter. BTEC's access to HE diplomas not considered anywhere in the EU to the best of our knowledge. Now, I have heard that some places in Slovakia might consider them. Honestly, I'm not convinced. Okay. Now, here are some of the things which are rarely going to be part of the application process, but are things that you might expect to see in the UK. Interviews, well, occasionally they happen, sometimes they're required, but they are quite rare. Of the universities we work with, I think 2 have an interview requirement. Okay. UCAT scores, I mean, look, this is useful information, but it's not really important. There are 1 or 2 universities that will give you an exemption from an entrance exam based on a decent UCAT score. I know Medical University of Warsaw in Poland has done this in recent years, but don't imagine that a weak UCAT score is necessarily going to hold you back, nor a strong one is going to make you look like a good candidate. Other things that people in other countries applying to dentistry just don't do is work experience or EPQs. These are just not common in other countries. So it's difficult for universities abroad to factor these in a meaningful way because they have to compare you based on high school diploma to high school diploma rather than high school diploma plus all the extra boxes you ticked and all the rest of it. Now, if you're hearing that and thinking, I've just said don't do an EPQ or don't get work experience, absolutely not. I'm not devaluing them in the slightest, but I am saying international universities probably ain't going to look at them too much. Personal statements and academic references. I would say by now most universities have a form of personal statement that's required, usually called a motivation letter. they are going to want to know why you want to be a dentist, why you're prepared to go abroad to do so, and what your motivation is behind that. Academic references. Of the 10 or so universities that we work with, there's only one that's going to need to see a reference from your school, and that's actually quite rare. Now, one thing that will come up as part of the entrance process in many countries, but not all, are entrance exams. Most EU dental schools rely on entrance exams as the number one thing you need to pass, if you like. Sometimes your chances of getting in are 100% based on the entrance exam. This is true in countries like Italy, for example. Other times it will be part of a more balanced consideration of your high school diploma, etc. That would certainly be true in Bulgaria. Places like Spain is the main country where they don't really rely on entrance exams as such, although some will have admissions tests, which are nowhere near as demanding as a proper entrance exam. Okay. The next thing to say about entrance exams is that nearly every university has a different one. So every time you apply to a university abroad, you're probably going to have to prepare for an exam that's slightly different. And because they're all slightly different in terms of the curriculum from UK A levels, that's going to mean additional study. So you really do have to spread yourself a little bit thinly with this. With entrance exams, I actually recommend that if you're applying to a university that needs one, don't do this alongside your A levels. Never jeopardize your A level performance because of an entrance exam. It's much easier to retake an entrance exam if need be than it is to retake an A level. Much easier, much less expensive. So please don't, whatever you do, interfere with your preparation, particularly as most entrance exams will be around March, April, leading into the exams next year. I would encourage you not to sit exams there, unless you're in a gap year, of course, and then it makes perfect sense. Some universities will have exams in July, August, so after the pressure is off, you could maybe take them then. Some even into September, October with Medical University Sofia, and the Italian options are really quite late. But don't let an entrance exam interfere with your A levels. What will be on the entrance exam? More often than not, well, always, I would suggest multiple choice biology and chemistry. Okay, that's pretty much always there. Sometimes there'll be a logic component, maybe maths or physics. Okay, so these are the kind of areas that will be on the entrance exam. You might have to travel to the university to take the exam. That picture has become a little bit more unclear in recent years. I mean, immediately after COVID, everything went online, but now and again, people are having to go back to take or go to the university they want to go to take an entrance exam. Obviously, that adds to the expense involved, but I would look on the bright side and say it's also a good chance for you to do your homework and to see whether that university is something that you actually like. Okay, so that's good advice about what you should do. Okay, how to think about universities abroad and what kind of things you're letting yourself in for from an entrance or application strategy point of view. But here are a few things that I definitely don't want you to do. These are the things that students do every year, and it's annoying and counterproductive. Don't apply everywhere all at once. There is no point. Okay, I know you're going to be flapping and thinking, oh my gosh, I just need to get a seat. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. And, this agent, me, is telling me only to apply to one place. I'm going to try to apply everywhere. Why? I can give you, for some universities, 95% certainty of what your chances are. The worst ones we work with, probably around 60, 70%. I can tell you if it's a waste of time or not. I can tell you if it's going to work out. I would also tell you, don't apply everywhere all at once, because you will probably hear back from your third or your fifth choice before you hear from your first choice. And that's going to cause you problems, okay? Because you might end up confirming and paying for your fifth choice and never seeing that money again. So be sensible, talk to us in enough time. We can help you develop a good strategy. My absolute least favorite conversations are when people approach us after they've tried everywhere and gotten into a mess, okay? We'll deal with it, but please don't do it, okay? Similar to that, don't apply somewhere just to see what will happen. We can probably tell you what will happen, okay? Definitely don't apply to a university you've got no interest in going to, but hey, let's see if I could get a place there. I'd just like to know, all right? That is a waste of everybody's time. It's a little bit disrespectful, to be honest, okay? It's not necessary. The other thing that I would advise you not to do, and we get asked, we'll get this more these days, I would suggest, is apply with the intention of switching dental schools between countries after a year or two, i.e., to try and transfer. So maybe you can't get into your chosen university because it's full this year, but you think if I go and study somewhere else, then maybe I'll be able to transfer into my favorite university after a year. You know what? You probably aren't. Okay, it's extremely unlikely that a transfer is going to work that way. If you have got one university that you want to go to and there are no others that are worthy of your consideration, well, I think you're making a mistake, frankly. But if that is the way you think, it's not my job to convince you otherwise. Wait a year. Okay. This is the only sensible thing to do in those circumstances, assuming you meet the entry requirements. If you don't, then obviously, please give up and do something else. Now, I'd now like to move on to a question which I know you're going to ask in afterwards, and something that's hugely important. And the annoying thing is, I was reviewing my slides from last year on this point and the year before, and unfortunately, there hasn't been a change at all. Recognition of dental qualifications post-Brexit. Okay, if you study in Ireland, you have no problem, but you're not going to end up studying in Ireland, I would suggest, if you're not getting a place in the UK. It's just really super tough to get in there. European Union, well, if you graduate there this year or next, you've got absolutely no problem coming back to the UK from 2028 onwards. Who knows? I'll come back to that in a moment. If you graduate outside the European Union, you're going to have to do the overseas registration exam. There is no way around that. Currently, that's probably going to take you about 2 years to complete, and it's really, really difficult. And depending on where you studied, you may or may not have a good chance of getting through it. Okay. We have found that, for example, with students going to places like Georgia, that I still don't think to this day anybody from the UK has actually passed the overseas registration exam. So going to Georgia to study dentistry, not if you want to work in the UK, I would suggest. If you want to work somewhere else, it might make sense. Now, coming back to this point about the European Union and automatic recognition and the ORE to a certain extent, because that's going to be reformed in 2028 as well. It might get a little bit easier, by which I mean it won't be lower standard, but it might get a little bit easier to take it from a practical point of view. The only people I would trust with information on this are the General Dental Council. Okay, go to their website. Now, as I said, I've been using this in my presentation for, crikey, 3 years now. It's 3 years old. We are 3 years into this 5-year consultation process, and we are no closer to knowing what the situation is going to be. Now, I am more optimistic than I was a year or two ago, primarily because we have a different government now. I'm also more optimistic because, this year, around 40% of all the people who joined the register were people who qualified at EU dental schools. So if they disappear for any reason, we have got an even worse recruitment situation in the UK. I'm also confident that on a political level, this whole debate might just go away if we get to a point where recognition of qualifications across the EU is automatic, much as it was when we were in the EU. This is something that the UK government wants. So it might be that this whole debate disappears. But unfortunately, I've got no new information on this. Nobody's got any new information on this. As soon as we have it, of course, we're going to promote it and let people know, because we get asked this question a lot. And I spend probably 1,000 years of my life every year explaining this situation to people. So my feedback on this is don't worry about it too much, but I can't make the problem go away. Who am I to do that? Now, if you are thinking about other routes into dentistry, I just thought I'd give you some advice on what might be out there that might be sensible. Say it doesn't work out in the UK and you're not 100% ready to go and study abroad. Okay. Foundation years in the UK or abroad. Now, we work with a number of foundation years. Our number one rule for working with a foundation year is you must be guaranteed a place in first year dentistry if you pass it. If that guarantee isn't there, I'm not interested, and nor should you be. Okay. Foundation years in the UK, there are quite a number of universities offering years that will give you the chance to get into the first year. Sorry, that chance is small. Okay, so be mindful of that. They might promise it to 100 people and only a handful actually end up succeeding and getting into dentistry. Foundation years in the UK will not necessarily improve your chances of going to universities abroad as well. So, and foundation years abroad definitely won't improve your chances of getting in the UK. Foundation years are also often tied to particular universities. So if you go to a university for its foundation year, the expectation will be that you stay there for your dentistry degree. Using it to move to a different dentistry degree is actually unlikely. Now, the other thing that I know you'll be offered in the UK is biomedical science. I'm very sure that nearly everybody applying next year for 4 dental schools, their 5th option will be something like biomed science or maybe pharmacy or whatever. Getting into that is easier. Of course it is. Getting into graduate entry afterwards is not easier. Okay. So you might find yourself doing a 3-year degree on the promise of ending up in a 4-year program in the UK. It will work for some people. It won't work for everybody. If you get to the end of a biomed science degree, you can still go to university abroad. Of course you can, but please bear in mind that the credits you've earned in a biomed degree will not be accepted for credit recognition or transfer purposes. And if they are, that is a red flag. Okay. Do not go to a university that does that, because the chances are they're playing fast and loose with their own country's laws, and they're doing it just to get bums on seats. Okay. The degrees that get flagged by the GDC, the ones that they don't recognize, or the universities they've had problems with over the years, are ones where they've delved into what the students have actually got when they come back to the UK. And it turns out to be not study from that university, but study recognized from elsewhere. Now, study recognized from elsewhere is legitimate up to a point if it's dentistry credits to dentistry credits. Okay. So if you study in dentistry in the EU and you want to move to somewhere else in the EU to study dentistry, or indeed if you're studying in the UK and want to move somewhere in the EU, it's possible we can have that conversation. You probably won't like the outcome of it because you probably won't get full recognition of everything you've done, but you know, it is a conversation that we can have. Another thing I would say that you need to be very aware of is starting abroad and transferring back to the UK. No, it just never happens. Okay, so I've given you a little bit of advice on the things I think you need to consider when developing a strategy. I'm now going to talk a little bit more about where your options are, and I'm going to run through some of the most popular ones in a little bit more detail. I'm going to try and keep this brief because I want to get to questions now. Roughly 60 dental schools teaching English in the European Union. This number has grown. This year alone, we're aware of a new one in Malta. I am always skeptical about Malta simply because there have been that many private dental schools launched there that have been shut down a couple of years later. There is one at the moment, which I think hopefully will survive, but you know, let's wait and see, is my take on that. Now, other dental schools that have launched this year, 3, 1, 2, 3, at least 3 in Spain that I can think of. They are now up to 12 dental schools teaching dentistry in English. There are 8 in Poland, 5 in the Czech Republic, and as you can see there are a number in other countries. The countries I put there at the asterisk at the bottom, Bulgaria, Croatia, and Italy, these are the main countries where it takes 6 years to graduate. Okay, so that is different from a standard 5-year, BDS equivalent. It is a higher level of degree. You're not like taking 6 years to complete the same level of qualification, but it is, shall we say, unnecessary for you to start your career in the UK. You'd probably want to come back, get some training, get some practice, and then go on to postgraduate training in the UK. I would argue that's a more sensible route through this. But, yeah, it's not the end of the world, but it's probably, it is a loss of a year's earning potential. Tuition fees and the number of seats available in individual countries. Well, you can see that. I don't necessarily intend to read all of this out. I will focus on a couple of things there. Italy, very popular because the public universities are very cheap. But seriously, there are only 16 seats in the whole country for non-EU students. It is a long shot. Because of the way the application process works, their entrance exam takes place in September, October for the course, or September for the course that starts in October, a few weeks later. Okay, it is chaos. Okay, so it might work, but honestly, I wouldn't put all your eggs in the Italy basket. Bulgaria, very, very popular with British students. 314 seats available for teaching in English, but in Bulgaria they do operate quotas, meaning that not all of those are available to EU nationals. Now, I don't know the precise quota for 2 of the 3 dental schools there, but I do know at Medical University of Sofia, I think it's like about 28, 30, something like that. Medical University of Sofia also has a lot of students who do their foundation year now before going into dentistry, making it a 7-year pathway to qualifying there. Czech Republic, Poland, good, solid, middle of the road options, I would suggest. Cyprus, all 200 places there are at one university, European University Cyprus. They probably by now have about 30 students from the UK in every year, so it's growing. Spain, though, if you look at that, well, you can see the fees there are not exactly cheap, but 1,140 places available for dentistry in English. Now, again, that is my estimate. I might be slightly wrong, but I can promise you plus or minus 10%. Okay. Now, if you think about it, the UK as a whole has probably about 1,150 places in English, including the 50 new places coming next year. So there are as many places in Spain as there are in the UK. Now, this is partly because Spain has realized this is a fantastic way for its universities to make money, and they know full well that these people will come, qualify, and go home again. Okay, so that expansion is rapid. I am a little bit hesitant about the size of this scale of expansion, because whenever you see things like this happening, it's it's often not for the very best reasons, let's put it that way. But Spain is increasingly popular with British students. I would say this year around 100 from the UK will be studying in Spain. And where can we help you? Well, this is where I'm going to talk a little bit more about Spain. Now, the university that we've become most associated with over the years, I suppose, is UCV, Universidad Católica de Valencia. This is a 5-year, fully taught in English program. You need to have Spanish by the end of year 3, like I said. That approximately 65% of students from the UK, I have to change that. It's actually approximately 90%, it looks like, this year. So the numbers have gone up. This is the one downside of this university, if you like. It is too British. But I know a lot of you are hearing that and thinking, wow, this is great. That's what I want. But please be aware, the fact that there are lots of British people in the room with you does not make it a British dental school, okay? Don't imagine you're just at some kind of branch campus abroad. You definitely are not. Entry requirements, ABB, must include biology and chemistry. There is an online entrance test that will be changed for next year. It's going to include more biology and chemistry. We will have more details on that fairly soon, but this is going to be something that means that if you speak to people who did the test in previous years, their advice is not going to be helpful. The interview, there is an interview, has to happen in person in Valencia. This is largely because we want everybody to go over there and look at the opportunity directly, okay? We want you to see with your own eyes whether or not this is going to be right for you. The interview is mostly about your motivation and maturity. The team that will be interviewing you are not dentists. They are people who know what it takes to be an international student, okay? So that's really what they're interested in looking for. Admissions will open in mid-September, meaning that if you're getting your predicted grades through, if you're going into year 13, get them as soon as you possibly can. You might need to ask for them before the UCAS grades are available, okay? If you've got results from this summer, you're welcome to send them through to us as soon as you've got them, but we won't be able to tell you anything or start anything official until mid-September 2026. If you don't get the grades required, between 3Bs and 3Cs, or if you have the wrong A levels, like if you have one of biology and chemistry but not both, we can probably get you in to the foundation program starting in January 2027. But I do have to say that because of the very small number of places available and the number of people applying for it, that is super competitive as well. Universidad Europea, this is another university we've worked with for about 15 years now. They have 4 campuses in Spain, 2 teaching fully in English in Madrid and Malaga, 2 teaching bilingually, i.e. 3 years in English, 2 years in Spanish, in Valencia and Alicante. About 15% of the students in Madrid are from the UK. Similar in Malaga, I think, less in Valencia and Alicante for the language reasons. You pretty much need really good grades to get in here. It's tougher to get in here now than it is for UCV and some of the others. But this year, most of the students we've helped have had either 4 A levels or have had the International Baccalaureate, Irish Leaving Certificate, Scottish Highers and Advanced Highers. A levels are tricky. So if you've got your heart set on this university, let me know what your predicted grades are, and I'll tell you if I think it's going to work or not. Admissions for this university will not open before November this year. Again, sorry, I should have updated this to November 2026. The first admission round will be in December, but we'd like to have everything in place by November to help you. We also get more students in the first round than in any other round. They also have a foundation program too. UCAM in Cartagena. Some people think it's in Murcia, the main university is, but the campus teaching and dentistry is only Cartagena. Again, ABB entry requirements, about 20%, probably this year, maybe 30% of their students coming from the UK. We can get you in for 2027 if you already, but I'm typically only putting forward people who've already got grades. If you're waiting for your grades this year, there is no harm in waiting till results day and then trying for UCAM. The advantage of UCAM, I would say, is that it is the most affordable of the Spanish options. So if you're wanting Spain but worried about budget, this is the one to go for. Cyprus, this is honestly one of my favorites, okay? Our students here are happier than anywhere except UCV. So I think it's a really, really good option. I think the fact that you don't have to learn much of the local language makes it really popular as well. This year, probably about 30, so around 15% of the students will be from the UK. And getting an offer is relatively straightforward. The application process for Cyprus is basically the same in it's basically the same as it is in the UK minus the UCAT, okay? There may or may not be an interview. If there is, it will be online, and it's usually only in borderline cases. Now, we could probably still get you in from the waiting list for this year. There might still be 1 or 2 places available, but it's fluid. And to be honest, they are starting to prioritize students who have EU passports because getting a visa is problematic. Now, these are also universities that we work with, which I'm not going to go through in quite so much detail. University of Rijeka, that's in Croatia. Very good university. I like it a lot. Croatian admissions, unfortunately, have become disastrous in recent years. So the application process is not favorable. Wrocław University in Poland, medical university rather than the main university there. We can help you apply there. Get in touch with us. We can do that on a consultancy basis. So we might have to charge you a fee for it, but we have very good relationship with that university and we should be able to get you in there. Unie Universidad, this is a brand new one for us. This is in Madrid. Brand new university, opened just in the north of the city. Beautiful location for it. The clinics are actually open before the university is. We've already got 3 students in there for this September, and we will potentially have 10 by the time admissions close, but I do already have about 10 applications in process. If you're looking to apply for Spain right now, this is the one to go for. But for 2027, I will have a lot more information available about this. And I think this could be a very popular option because I think the entry requirements will be lower than UE and the tuition fees will be a bit lower as well. So that concludes everything that I wanted to tell you about how to apply and where to apply. I am now going to, leave this slide up for a second so that you can make a note of my email address, our website, Twitter, and our WhatsApp. And we will be happy to respond to you at any time through these channels. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen